Okay, today's lesson is about solving system of equations using substitution. Okay, now this is a look into something that we will do later down the road in our unit, in this unit of solving system of equations. But I kind of wanted to give you a taste since I'm not going to be there for most of it, for most of the period. So this is what I want. I have a worksheet for you. That's 3 problems, okay? There are 3 word problems, but this is how you do them. And this is in like an introduction to the method that we're going to be talking about is the substitution method, to kind of show you how to do that so that when we come back on Wednesday, then you kind of know what's going on, okay? So if you don't super get it, it's going to be okay, but please give it a shot. I know they're word problems, but please give it your best try. All right? So, anytime we do our word problems, remember we're going to use the rate method. And I think I've talked about this before, but remember that it's read, annotate, think, and then encode. Okay? So read, we need to read the problem first, and we don't discount it just because it's a word problem. A store sold a total of 125 car stereo systems and speakers in 1 week. The stereo systems sold for $104.95 and the speakers sold for $18.95. The sales from these 2 items totaled $6,926.75. How many of each item were sold? Okay, that was the reading part. If you need to read it again, pause this video. We'll be at this picture for a while and read it. Okay, read it as many times as you need. Because remember, it was only 3 problems. You got plenty of time in class to do this. Okay, the next one is annotate. And that means look through the problem and figure out what's important. So if you need to underline stuff, whatever you got to do, do it. Okay, so here, 125 car stereos and speakers. Okay, so there's 2 items that they're talking about, car stereo systems and speakers, in 1 week that they sold. Okay, the stereo systems sold for $104.95. Those 2 things are attached to one another, so that must be important. The speakers sold for $18.95, so the speakers and this price of $18.95 must be important. Okay, now the total sales from both of them is this $6,926.75. So that must be important. Okay, but go back, total together, so selling, because all these dollar amounts should kind of combine to one another. Okay, and then how many each item were sold. Okay, now the first thing we got to do is we got to define our variables. Okay, you got to be able to decide what means what, so that when you write these equations, so we can use this method, you actually have something to go off of. Okay, so X, let's say, is car stereo systems. It doesn't matter what variables you use, you just got to state some. Okay, so X is car stereo systems, that means Y has got to be the speakers. Alright, now, for system of equations, that means you should have 2 equations. That's key to be able to do this. Okay? If you don't have 2 equations, then you're not going to be able to solve either variable. Okay? So, now, let's try to set up a first one. This first sentence says there were a total of 125 car stereo systems and speakers sold in 1 week. Now, do you know which, like, how many of each? No. That's why we have a variable that represents each, but you do know the total. Okay, so total of 2 things put together means that you're adding the 2, right? So our first equation is X plus Y must equal 125. So the number of car stereo systems sold plus the number of speakers sold must add up to 125 things sold, okay, in a week. So there's your first equation. Now the next one, they kind of make this obvious in this is that all the dollar amounts should have something to do with one another. Okay? So the price for a stereo system is $104.95, right? Okay? But that's attached to your stereo systems, which is X. Now, think of how you make money, or like when you buy something, the number of things you buy at the price value that it's sold at tells you the cost of what you have to pay, or how much money you make when you're selling things, okay? So if I have to multiply the two to be able to get that, so 104.95 times X should be the representation or relationship between the two. Then I'm going to add that because it's a total amount. So I'm going to add all my money together to get this $6,926.75. So that means that $18.95 must be attached to my speakers because I'm selling the number of speakers to that. So those must be multiplied to one another. And then I have this 629. Oops. Got my number switch up. 6,926.75. Okay? So those are two equations. Now, this method of substitution is something that we'll talk about on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Okay? So don't think this is the last time we'll ever see this. But substitution means that you're going to take an equation and sub it in to another equation. Okay? Okay, so now you got to be able to solve one of your equations for a variable. This is the key part for substitution. Now, always pick one that makes it easy. So, looking at this equation, since you have x and y already by themselves, there's no numbers attached to them, it makes it pretty easy to solve for one. So, let's say we do that for this x plus y equals 125 equation. Okay? Now, it doesn't matter which equation or variable you solve for. Okay? Sometimes here you get a choice. Sometimes it's easier for one than the other, but pick the one that's easiest for you. So here, let's say I solve for y. So I'm going to subtract x to the other side. Okay? Now remember, x and 125 are not like terms, so I'm going to leave them separate from one another and write them like this. Okay? Now, the key or the main part of substitution is that now that you have a y equals this stuff, okay, negative x plus 125. Notice that you have a y in this other equation. So that means that I'm going to put in the information that y is equal to in for y, which allows me to have an equation with just one variable. Okay, so here I'm going to rewrite this equation over here. And I'm going to plug in my information. How about we move it down because I don't have enough room. So 104.95x plus 18.95. Okay. Now this is the key. Put parentheses around your stuff. Okay, and then insert it in. So that means this is going in for, because it's going in for that, so that means you plug it in for y. So negative x plus 125. Okay, now you have a new equation. So now I have a number in front of my parentheses. So what I've already taught you is that you multiply through. So 1895 times negative x is negative 1895x plus 1895 times 125 is 2,368.75, which equals 6,926.75. Okay? So now I'm going to combine like terms. These are my like terms right here. So 104.95 minus 1895, or plus a negative 1895x, gives me 86x. Okay, now I have a two-step equation in front of me. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 2,368.75 to both sides, because these are like terms. Leaves you 86x on one side. So 6,926.75 minus 2,368.75 gives me 4,558. Okay? Then the last step, 86 is multiplied to x, so I need to divide. So that divided by 86 gives me 53. Okay? So that means that x, I sold 53 car stereo systems. Okay? Let's go back. Now you need to know how many speakers you sold. So if you go back to this equation, y equals negative blank x plus 125. So you're going to insert this 153 in for your x over here to figure out your y value. Okay, so negative 53 plus 125 is 72. Okay, so the answer to this problem is that you have 53 car stereo systems sold, and then you have 72 speakers sold. And then that would be my answer. Okay? So substitution method is a method where we can solve one equation for one variable, plug it in to another equation, so we're substituting it in, kind of like you do a number, and then once you find what that value is, you sub it back into the other equation to find that value. So it's like a double substitution so that you can solve both variables. Okay? Give it a try. Make sure you give it your best effort. Okay? Thank you. Have a good day.